If you're someone who rarely posts photos on social media, psychology says you probably have a few traits that most people just don't have. In this video, I'm going to walk you through what your silence online actually says about your mindset and why it's a lot more interesting than you might think. Hey, I'm Jessica. So I used to feel this constant pressure to post my life online just to keep up with everyone else. I'd take photos, overthink them for like an hour, and still never end up posting anything, which honestly made me feel like I was the one doing something wrong. But then I came across some actual psychological research on why certain people don't share their lives online, and it genuinely changed how I see myself. So, what does it actually mean when someone doesn't post their photos online? Because on the surface, it seems pretty straightforward, right? They're shy, maybe insecure, maybe they just don't like the attention. But psychology says it goes a lot deeper than that. And once you get this, you might start seeing these people in a completely different way. So the first thing to understand is this. For a lot of these people, it's not about hiding. It's about protecting. They have what psychologists call a strong privacy orientation. And what that basically means is they're very intentional about what they share. And maybe more importantly, what they don't. In a world where people are constantly broadcasting their lives, these people choose to keep certain things just for themselves. Not because they have something to hide, but because they genuinely value having control over their own personal space. And that's actually a really important distinction. Because most people today are just used to sharing everything. These people are selective. They don't feel the need to turn their life into content. And this leads into something even more interesting. They don't rely on external validation the same way most people do. Think about it. Why do people usually post photos? To share moments, sure. But also for the likes, the comments, that little hit of dopamine when someone reacts to something you put out there. But people who don't post much? They've often built something a lot stronger than that. Internal validation. They don't need other people to confirm their worth because they already feel it themselves. And when you're not dependent on that external approval, you stop kind of performing for an audience. You start actually living for yourself. Now here's where it gets a bit deeper. These people tend to have a really strong sense of self. In psychology, this is linked to something called self-concept clarity. Basically, they know who they are. They understand their values. They know what matters to them. And they're not looking for constant feedback to figure that out. And why does that matter? Because when you don't have that clarity, you're way more likely to look outside for it. You compare yourself to others. You follow trends. You adjust yourself based on how people respond to you. But when you do have it, you're just a lot less influenced by all of that noise. And that's a big reason why these people don't feel the urge to post. Not because they can't, but because they genuinely don't feel the need to. Another thing that shows up a lot is emotional security. And this one's important. Because there's a real difference between not posting because you're afraid and not posting because you're secure. From the outside, those two can look identical. But internally, they're completely different. People with secure self-esteem don't need attention to feel okay. They're not trying to prove anything. They're not chasing reactions. They're just stable. And because of that, they tend to be less anxious, less caught up in comparison, and a lot more focused on what's actually happening in front of them. Hey, real quick, if this is making sense so far or you're finding yourself nodding along, it'd mean a lot if you subscribed. I put out videos like this pretty regularly and it genuinely helps the channel grow. Okay, back to it. Have you ever noticed that a lot of these people are also just really thoughtful? Like they tend to think before they speak. They observe more, they process things quietly. That's not a coincidence. A lot of them are naturally more introspective. Instead of immediately sharing a moment, they actually sit with it and experience it fully. Instead of thinking, how will this look online? They're asking, what does this actually mean to me? And that shift is honestly pretty powerful because it changes the whole way they move through life. Here's something else most people don't realize. These people usually operate from an internal standard, not external pressure. In psychology, this is called an internal locus of evaluation, which just means they judge themselves based on their own values, not based on how other people react to them. So whether a photo gets 10 likes or 10,000, it genuinely doesn't shift how they see themselves. And when you think about it, that's a kind of freedom that most people just don't have. Now, none of this means they never use social media, and it definitely doesn't mean they're antisocial. That's a pretty common misconception. A lot of them actually have really strong relationships, deep conversations, meaningful connections. They just prefer quality over visibility. They'd rather share a real moment with a few people than blast it out to everyone. But here's where it all ties together. Not posting photos is usually less about what someone lacks and more about what they already have. A strong sense of identity, emotional stability, internal validation, clear personal boundaries. And because they have those things, they just don't feel the same pull to constantly put themselves out there. So the next time you come across someone who never posts their photos, don't assume they're insecure. Don't assume they're hiding from something. There's a pretty good chance they're just operating on a completely different level psychologically. And maybe the real question worth asking is this. In a world where everyone is trying to be seen, what does it say about someone who simply doesn't need to be? Anyway, I hope that gave you a bit of a new perspective. If you enjoyed it, subscribe for more videos like this. I'd love to have you here.